Welcome to session number 3 of the Alberta Healthy Community Symposium. We're going to be talking about traditional ways of making relations today. And so myself, I'm Brianna Morin. I'm a program officer of engagement and reconciliation with Communities Choose Well. And I am also honored to be our host and facilitator for today. So before we get into things, I just want to provide some housekeeping items for participants and attendees. Just so you know, the session is being recorded for those who are unavailable to attend today. And there will also be no Q&A at the end of the session, as we want to maximize the time with our panelists today. But if you do have any comments you'd like to share, I welcome you to throw those into the Zoom or Whova chat box. And we'd also like to thank our partners at Alberta Blue Cross for sponsoring, of course, the event and this session specifically, and we will hear from them shortly. So before we get into things, as the elders who we work with have taught us, it is important to begin our business with cultural protocol. And so I would like to welcome this session and open it with a land acknowledgement and a tobacco offering. And we will also have one of our panelists sing the ARPA honor song to open up the session. All of this before I pass it over to Alberta Blue Cross. So I myself would like to acknowledge that I am calling in from Amiskwitchi, Waskahigan, which is otherwise known as Edmonton and is located here in Treaty 6 territory. In terms of tobacco offering, I would like to welcome and introduce Adrian Goulet, who will be getting us started soon with our opening song. Adrian, who is also known as White Wolf Man in Cree and Genuine People Helper in Blackfoot. He has been living in the Calgary community for over 30 years and has adapted his traditional skills and teachings into his new surroundings, such as drumming, singing, and dancing. And among many of his professional roles and accomplishments, he is currently the Cultural Reconnection Coordinator with the Aboriginal Friendship Centre of Calgary and works as a ceremonial helper and singer alongside Blackfoot Knowledge Keeper, Dr. Reg Crowshoe. And so Adrian, as you're preparing and before you begin, I would like to offer, give me one moment. I need the My bad. I thought I had it on my desk with me, but I would like to offer you this tobacco to honor your singing today and your time with us as a panelist. And as for all of our other panelists as well, I would also like to offer you this tobacco to each of you to also acknowledge your time and wisdom that you'll be sharing today with all of us, and so that we can move forward in a good way and have a really good panel. So yes, your tobacco is here, and we will arrange for you to receive it after the symposium. So, all right, Adrian, please take it away with opening with the ARPA honor song.
Thank you, Brianne. Honored to be able to sing this morning's song and to get us started. So, song is very important in our oral culture. It's part of our way we get things started, and it's like validation to things that we do. So I'll start the ARPA song.
Thank you, Adrian. That was beautiful. It's always great hearing you sing. And so yeah, for those of you who don't know, that is the ARPA honor song. And we hope that you'll get to hear more of that in future events as they come out. So thank you, Adrian. I would now like to pass it over to Anita from Alberta Blue Cross to introduce herself and the focus of this panel. So over to you, Anita.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anita, and I'm the Wellness Partnerships and Innovation Specialist with Alberta Blue Cross. On behalf of Alberta Blue Cross, it's an absolute pleasure to be here virtually. I would also like to acknowledge I'm joining everyone today from the traditional territories of the Treaty 7 Nations in Southern Alberta and the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. I'd like to thank everyone for joining in on today's session. For the last 3 years, Alberta Blue Cross has supported this conference in person and now virtually. Alberta Blue Cross is committed to not only helping maintain health, but promoting wellness through every age and stage of life. With a focus on wellness, we seek to empower potential and play a bigger role in promoting wellness in our communities. In addition to Brianna, who you've met already, we have 5 amazing panelists who will be sharing their insights into the ways in which they build strong relationships with individuals, community, and organizations. I'll turn it over to Brianna to introduce our panelists and begin our discussion about making relations, connection to community, and wellness.
Awesome. Thanks, Anita. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. So for the sake of time, we can get right into it. We're ready to dive into the panel discussion where we'll hear from our 5 panelists. So just as a reminder, in terms of the format, panelists, I will introduce you in the order that you speak, and you will all have the chance to respond to the same question in the order that I call your name. So without further ado, our first question is, how would you define community wellness? And so Casey, I will invite you first to speak to this question. And as a brief introduction, Casey Yellowbird is the manager of Samson Youth and Sport Development for Samson Cree Nation. And he is also the recent winner of the Communities Choose Well Individual Champion Award. So welcome, Casey. How do you define community wellness?
Okay, thank you, Brianna, and welcome everybody. My name is Casey Yellowbird, as mentioned. I was thinking about this, within the last week because, as you may or may not know, we had an incident take place in our community, that just brought back a lot of memories in terms of wellness, meaning that, when we have an incident that involves, firearms and youth, it's always an eye opener. So to define wellness means to gauge, I guess, the social state of a community. For example, like Indigenous communities, we always follow that concept of, the medicine wheel, the spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical, but at some point, I think, in terms of like community wellness through Indigenous lens, I think that's how for me, that's how I view our wellness in our communities. How well are we, in terms of those four quadrants? And yeah, that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. I will move it on to Carly, and I will invite her to speak to the same question. Carly Croshoe is a Blackfoot ceremonialist, entrepreneur, and a proud mom of 2 young boys. She is currently contracted with ARPA to help transition the Elders Knowledge Circle into a brand new nonprofit society. So welcome, Carly. We're happy to have you here as well. How would you define community wellness?
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Carly Croshoe. I'm really excited to be a part of this panel. Thank you, Brianna, for inviting me. So when I think about community wellness, first, for me personally, I like to think about the words individually. So when I think of my community, I have a few. So I think of my community as my work, so my colleagues. I think of my community also as members of my family. I also think of my community of where I grew up, so the Piikani Nation. And I also think of community as a society or a ceremony family that I have. And then when I think of wellness, I think of practicing like healthy habits on a daily basis. And I imagine wellness being a physical, a mental, and spiritually somewhat in a good place. So I like to ask myself sometimes, like, are my colleagues, are members of my team in a healthy place, in a good, how is everyone feeling overall? How are the people within my family feeling? How are the people within my community, the people who come to ceremony for help? How are they, what's well-being are they in spiritually, emotionally, and physically? And so when I think about community wellness, the wellness of those people within those communities really contributes onto like how we are going to make relations. So naturally making relations falls into that category of really being aware of the wellness of your community members. Yeah, so that's how I think of community wellness.
Thank you, Carly. Next up, I would like to introduce and welcome Reagan Bartel. Reagan is the Director of Health for the Métis Nation of Alberta. She holds a master's in public health and is a proud Métis woman who works to strengthen her community through research, advocacy, and public programming. So Reagan, welcome. And how would you define community wellness?
Thanks for having me, guys. First of all, I just want to thank Adrian for starting us off in a wonderful way. That song was really powerful, and I'm going to sit with that for today. So thank you, Adrian. When I think of defining community wellness, I really like to think of it simply as everything that's needed for a community to really thrive and flourish. So for my community, community wellness is one where Métis folks are healthy, happy, safe, and they have those opportunities to be grounded in their culture, their traditions, their language. They're thriving as individuals and as part of their Métis families and the broader Métis community. So it really isn't about one single thing. Community wellness described by the Métis folks that I've had the joy of visiting with is holistic. It ensures that all their needs, whether it's social, spiritual, economic, cultural, environmental, even political, are actually being met. And for Métis folks that I have had, the joy to engage with, community wellness is relational. It's not just a relationship or connection to people, but also the places and spaces and the land around us. And those relationships are really central to building and maintaining community wellness, at least in my community and from my experiences. A community that is well has that ability to self-determine or highlight their own needs. So they play that role in driving the process of well-being, whether it's through sharing stories, experiences, perceptions, informing, and possibly even leading those processes wherever possible. But really what I want to highlight about community wellness is that I want to put a little bit of a caution on that, because don't take what I'm saying about Métis people as gospel. You can't think in absolutes when it comes to community wellness. The diversity amongst Métis people living in Alberta and across the Métis homeland means that there really is likely an infinite way to define community wellness. And I really like to counsel that caution because it certainly happens to Métis folks when we make generalizations, right? There's 52,000 folks that are citizens of the Métis Nation in Alberta and about 115,000 self-identified Métis people. So if we were to lump a definition of community wellness just to generally apply to Métis people, there's really a huge potential to make assumptions or generalizations that can actually be harmful to community wellness. So I'm happy to share my experiences as I know them, but I want people to really consider that my words aren't concrete. They're meant to kind of inspire reflection, which really is a process of decolonization. And the bottom line is it isn't actually what I think a definition of community wellness is that is important, but what the folks in community that you're working with are telling you how they define community wellness. And so that's what I would offer to the panel today. Thanks.
Thank you, Reagan. Oh, I'm loving all the diverse responses so far, and I think that's just yeah, it speaks to the fact that community wellness is evolving and it is different per community, per person. And I think too, it kind of ties back to the great disconnect we just saw about some people struggling to really define what community wellness is. So this is great. And thank you both, or thank you all three so far. I'd now like to introduce our fourth panelist, and who you already have seen, Adrian Goulet, to speak to this question as well. And as a reminder, he is currently the Cultural Reconnection Coordinator for the Aboriginal Friendship Center of Calgary, and he's been an active partner with ARPA and is involved in culture camps for both youth and elders over the past few years. So we're excited to have you back, have you here. And Adrian, how do you define community wellness?
And thanks everybody for
Oh, I think you're on mute. There we go.
Okay.
Now we can.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for that introduction, Brianne. I had to sort of think about that question and sort of looking at, wellness being doing things for healthy outcomes, right? And we're sort of all have these different communities we work with, and so I always go back to my traditional community, meaning people that I do ceremony with, people that I practice ceremony with. So I'm a singer, so I'm involved in singing those songs in that community. So I remember way back when I was younger, when we first started to do lodges and started to learn how to practice and do those things. And as we worked together as young guys, we became very good at what we were doing and creating a healthy lodge, I guess you would say. And one of the community elders wanted to lodge, so she had come there to lodge with us and of course to have some healings. So and all she did, she didn't talk too much. She just sort of just sat there and watched us. And her comment later was, I was very impressed of all you young men here working together, not talking a lot and just doing stuff automatically in unison to create this ceremony. So it was pretty cool to hear, because we didn't really think about it. We just sort of knew our jobs and what we needed to do. And so when you're creating ceremony, there's a lot of things that need to happen to create a healthy ceremony. And it starts by, getting those supplies that you need for ceremony, and getting the people that play different roles in that ceremony. And so when you're playing those different roles, there's practices and protocol and discipline that needs to happen within those roles. And within those roles, there's things that need to happen. You need to physically do things. You need to either gather medicines, get things ready, making sure you do protocol with that stuff, making sure you're understanding what you need to do. And then if you don't understand what you need to do, then you need to talk to the person that has that knowledge of what needs to happen to create that ceremony. So you're constantly in communication with the knowledge keeper that has that knowledge. As you create that ceremony, there's, you have to be in a good state of mind. Your mental mind has to be in a good place. So you need to do those practices to help you be in a good place before you even start to do those things. So you're going to smudge, you're going to say your prayers, you're going to get rid of things that might be hampering you from doing those things, because we're human beings. We have anger, we have fears, we have these things in our lives, but we can't do these things if we're in that state of mind. So you have to make sure you're in a good mental place. Emotionally, the same thing. You have to make sure you're in a good place. And then spiritually, that's all part of that, being connected to what you're doing. Spirituality is about being connected to everything, and everything is equal, and we all have equality. So within that circle, within that ceremony, in that community, we're all going to treat each other and practice with equality for everybody. So it doesn't matter who's there, who came to the ceremony. There's always a role for you, whether that's to help the ceremony or to sing for the ceremony, to support the elders in the ceremony, to bring foods, medicines, offerings, tobacco, whatever the case may be. You have an important role in that circle. And in that ceremonial circle, as you're doing these things, you have young children that are there, you have elders that are guiding us, you have young men there to do the physical labor, you have people that are there to help guide you. So it's that ceremonial community is very vital in learning how to take those practices that you've learned within there and to create wellness with other places. So for example, when I go to work, I try to keep those practices in my workplace, even though maybe other people practice differently, but I sort of try to project, how do I keep successful in a work community that's a very Western community? I'll use these practices to help with my wellness, and then to help hopefully project that to many people I work with, whether they're children, drumming for children, whether I'm working with adults or elders. I always try to keep those practices going. So there's many sort of these communities that we have in my I guess ceremonial community. We not only practice and we learn from each other, but we also come together and bring our gifts together. And I think one of the things I like is being able to identify people that have gifts and being able to have them fulfill those gifts that they have through creating wellness in communities. So thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. I'm just letting everybody know my internet just said it's unstable. So if I cut out, I apologize, but I am back now. So this is good. But no, beautiful with what you said. And I'm going to move it on to Janet. So I'd like to introduce Janet Naklia, who is the Director of People and Programs for Alberta Recreation and Parks Association. And she is the lead for the majority of the work that we do with the elders here in Treaty 7, including a capacity building culture camp that she's worked with alongside Adrian. So welcome, Janet. Good to have you here. How do you define community wellness?
Well, thank you for that question. And well, it's funny because I'm going last. So it's like, get out of my head, everyone. It's almost like a summary of what I've heard before me. But before I even start, I want to thank Adrian for the ARPA honor song. Every time I hear it as a member of ARPA, I have to say it does make my spirit soar. So like Reagan, I will be sitting with that song all day. I also want to acknowledge proper protocol. So Nia Maskiki Kihi Squale. That I just said I am Medicine Eagle Woman. That's a name that was given to me by Daryl and Linda Brass of the Medewan Lodge. And Nistawanago Skapitaki, that is the Blackfoot name that John Chief Moon Sr. gave me, which is Southern Eagle Woman. And to acknowledge those, because like Adrian was saying, we acknowledge the elders and the traditions that have gone before us to help settle our spirit. So I wanted to acknowledge that. I am here in Mohkinstsis in Calgary. And Reagan did a I love that contextual piece. I should say too, my voice is my own. I am a non-Indigenous colonizer settler, as they say, but also an ally who considers this work very important. So that also does give the context to what I'm saying in terms of the question. So I just wanted to say that as well. But yeah, so to this question, which is interesting because it is kind of very similar, but different a bit from what I've heard before me. If I think about community, I do think of it as people. So they might be in a place, like a neighborhood. They could be an area of interest, like who you work out with. I love Basset Hounds. I have Basset Hound friends. Or like Carly said, your family, right? A blood connection to what that community looks like. But what to me, when you talk about wellness, again, very much what Adrian was saying, is that wellness to me is a place where people accept my gifts. And not only do they accept my gifts, they're also willing to share their gifts with me. So maybe that's an elder who has wisdom. Maybe it's friendship. It could be resources like money or food or whatever it is. I know that those people have my back and I have theirs. And I think there is that sense of that's what community means. So really, the idea of community wellness, it's not a thing. It's like not a noun to me, but it's actually a reciprocal action. So community wellness is an action where it actually brings people together in relationships that help everyone around them get better with what resources they have to give at that time. So when I think of wellness, I really think of it as a fluid concept where it doesn't sit in one place, but in fact, it sits in the people that you surround yourself with. So that would be my concept of what community wellness is.
Thank you, Janet. I agree. I think there's that huge element of reciprocity in community wellness as a whole. And when people come together to really reciprocate those feelings and that kindness and that love, then you can really start to flourish as a community. So I just want to thank you all for sharing your thoughts on our first question there. That's really great. And I think it sets us right up for our next question that we'll move into here. So our second discussion topic is, tell us a story of a success of a strong relationship that you have built that supported your community in its wellness. And were there any challenges you encountered and how did you overcome them? Oh, Casey, you have your hand up. Sorry, I just didn't see that there.
Yeah, no problem. I'll answer that question, the second one. But I was just going to mention something had come to mind. Prior to my work with kinesiology at U of A, I worked with the Faculty of Extension at U of A in completing an Aboriginal health promotion citation through the Faculty of Extension. And one of our mentors and one of our instructors, Dr. Pat McCocus from Saddle Lake, she had she put everything in perspective in terms of wellness, because she said, she just left a question with us. She said, if you ever want to see, and if you ever want to gauge the wellness of a community, look at the dogs and on how things really are. I'll give you an example. I remember there was a time in my community when things weren't as good as, as they are today. But the dogs were really, were like gangs. It was really hard to walk, like from the town site to our local getting attacked by the dogs. So I really thought about that, and I know it really pushed a lot of buttons negatively in my community, but it really it made a lot of sense. So I just thought I'd add that too.
No, I appreciate that. I agree. Community is of all living beings, everyone incorporated. So yeah, I love that. And I think it's something that everyone can think about and maybe even pay attention to in your own communities as well. So I might just briefly welcome, would anyone like to add on to this first question before we do move on to the second one? I'll leave it open. All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for your sharing for the first question. The second one here, I will repeat it for all of us. So please tell us a success story of a strong relationship that you've built, and that how it has supported you in community wellness, and what challenges did you encounter and how did you overcome them? So Adrian, I will invite you this time to first speak to the question. Can you think of a success story, and were there any challenges?
Yeah, were there any challenges? Yeah, there's always lots of challenges. Thank you, Brianne. So I was thinking about a few different things, like as you think about stuff and things you've created and done over the years. And so one of the things we did over the years, with Alberta Health Services, was to help them with their Indigenous strategy. That was like 10 years ago. Me and my wife worked with them to help them start to do things and change things within their environment and within their management. And we came up with recommendations for that. So that was a pretty cool thing to do. Recently, probably was 3 or 4 years ago, started getting connected with the U of C Cummings School of Medicine to help them get connected to community and with elders that have knowledge around medicines and having those discussions and bring them in to do some practical things with them, these first-year students. That was a pretty cool thing to do also. But I would have to say probably most recently is ARPA. As ARPA, of course, we've done a lot of great things in the last 5 years, and it started with that document, the environmental scan document that was done. and the way we walk in life. That was done with them, and it was um, to be an ally in development of the Indigenous community is sort of the breakdown of that, and how do you do that, and so with ARPA and Janet's work, I started to work with her many years ago to get connected and start getting more into the community, and then support her vision of what she wanted to do with that that document and that purpose and those recommendations. And one of the things that we started to work on many years ago, I think that document was done 2016, I believe, right?
It was like 2015, just when the TRC came out.
Oh yeah, okay. So 2015. Yeah. So, you know, that's some years back now that we started this journey, and this journey has brought us many different things, and even to support our elders' visions of what they see that can happen when you work with people that can support and administer those things, and me supporting that, being a person to get have connections to and knowledge of obviously doing camps and helping to set those things up, and having the right people involved with that, having a good venue, having all those wonderful things, working with youth and elders and community. And basically the first year we actually had to build the camp. We didn't have a camp, like we didn't have structures. We had a chunk of land, and we had to create this place to create a camp. So that was fun. So you learn a lot, and you get guided by your elders and people, and you learn things over the years, and in developing that, and you become stronger in many different ways, and you're creating wellness for community, and you're doing a lot of mentorship. You're learning a lot of things that maybe you didn't know about all kinds of stuff. It could be medicines in the nearby fields. It could be things that you could use in the bush for different things, and teaching kids, you know, proper things about, you know, what's the proper wood to use in a teepee, what are things that you need to learn to be there. So those were pretty cool stuff to think about, how far we've come in this journey with ARPA, as myself and other partnerships we've created over the years with different agencies and groups and elders and people that have been involved in this journey also, but also up to sort of, you know, like management, high level understanding of what we're trying to accomplish by doing these things, just through practice and sort of just doing these things, right? So you can do all the documents you want, but unless you do something with it, it's just going to sit on the shelf. And believe me, there's many documents that are still sitting on people's shelves that need to be taken off the shelf and start doing it with just some practical ideas, and some very almost simplistic, because it's all possible and it can be done. So looking at you know, what were things that were you know, part of that growing part was, you know, you're always going to get pushback here and there about things, and you know, you might not have the resources, and those are struggles. Resources are the biggest struggle to doing these things, and support, and not just like a 1-year support. This has got to be a 10, 20-year support. I mean, we've been doing this for 7 years now, so we're only to this point, and we can do a better job of it as we go on, and not just a money support, but also human support to get involved and learn these things. Our youth being there, our kids being there, and to learn these things. So yeah, that's probably the best story, right, that I've had in this journey with ARPA. It's been pretty cool up to this point, and knowing and learning and seeing the community people here, and getting to meet them also. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. Don't want to be biased, but yes, ARPA is doing some great work, obviously, with the Indigenous partners and communities that we have, and through that too, they become friends. And I think that's important as well, is that making these relations is rooted in just wanting to make that friendship happen as well. So thank you, Adrian. I will have Reagan speak to this question next. So the floor is yours, Reagan.
Thanks. So I'm going to touch upon what I think a strong relationship, at least from my experience with community, is, just to kind of set the stage before I tell the story. So from my perspective, a strong relationship is one that creates space for that reciprocity. So it's really important to our community that we learn from each other. We share the responsibility, but we also share the benefits. A good relationship is one that recognizes diversity, both within the Métis communities, but also in worldviews, values, and beliefs. Partnerships and relationships need to be relevant, but the purposes really should be grounded in those community needs, and where possible, benefit all, but also acknowledge the contributions of both parties. And I really want to emphasize this within Indigenous communities, because often community input and expertise goes unnoticed, or isn't even recognized, or worse, isn't prioritized. And that can be really problematic, especially in places like academic or research partnerships, which have not historically gone well for at least the Métis community. I can only speak to my experience. Good relationships respect autonomy, individual and collective, identity, personal values. And for us here at the MNA, a good relationship really needs to ensure that the Métis context is understood and centered in any partnership or relationship that we're working to grow. So that's how I would define a strong relationship, one that centers values, worldviews, and beliefs of our Métis community, that really allows us to work together towards a common goal or purpose that flows out of community needs. Do I have examples? Yes, I have many. Did I want to highlight someone other than our sponsors, Alberta Blue Cross? I did. But honestly, they're not paying me to say this. They really are one of the best examples I have of a great relationship. So please know that they have not paid me to say this. It's a legitimate, heartfelt shout out to the team there at Alberta Blue Cross. So at our first meeting, much to my surprise, if I'm being honest, Alberta Blue Cross actually sought to understand what my needs were. And I say that I was surprised because one of the challenges that I often face in building relationships, whether it's academic, health services, or just a simple project, is that community needs can often take a back burner. Publications will take the forefront, or a researcher's needs. And that's not how you build a good relationship. So in this case, it actually wasn't about them. They maintained a focus on really trying to understand who the Métis were, what role the MNA had, and what could they do to support us in achieving our wellness goals. So now I want to be clear that what was strong is that they didn't actually burden me with highlighting who the Métis were. They had done their homework. They read what was available. They tried to ground themselves in whatever history and context that they had available to them, including doing their absolute best to understand any Métis specific protocols that were required in order to build that genuine relationship. To tell you that my jaw almost hit the floor is probably an understatement, because in that moment, they listened more than they spoke. And that's a lesson, friends, that anybody who is watching this needs to hear. When you're working in community, there's a time to listen. There's a time to provide advice, opportunity, and opinions. And I think it's really important when you're building those relationships in the beginning, you need to really listen. And from there, our relationship continued with Alberta Blue Cross always respectfully asking about community needs and always providing me an opportunity first before offering counsel or guidance. And I did rely on their counsel and guidance because they are experts in the area that I was seeking them out for. So Alberta Blue Cross prioritized building a relationship first through their active listening, through their validation, and their kindness. It wasn't about them landing a client. It was about what they could do for Métis across our province. And it wasn't lip service because they always followed through. And that's another important thing when you're building a relationship. And building a relationship requires trust. If you're not following through, you're undermining trust. So it's about more than talking the talk. It's about action. Were there challenges? Yes. The reality is that Canada hasn't really done a great job about making folks aware of who the Métis people are. Despite us being one of the 3 recognized Indigenous people, it wasn't really until, recently that the curriculum even really began to shine a light on who the Métis people were as a person or as a people. So there really was that need to ensure that Alberta Blue Cross understood who we were. And despite them having done their homework, it's really challenging when you don't have access to all the information. So there's only so much they could do. So circling back to that principle of reciprocity, it was actually my pleasure to ensure that Alberta Blue Cross had that understanding, because I knew they came from it, not as a place of burdening me, but from that place of relationship and truly wanting to center my needs and understanding the community in order to do that. So I know I have limited time. I'm happy really to connect with folks offline if we want to unpack any of those things further. But before I finish, I actually do want to say, Marcy, thank you to Leonard, Stacy, Scott, and all the other folks at Alberta Blue Cross. And you can tell they're meaningful because I know them by name. And that's also a great sign of a relationship. They heard our challenges and they continue to kind of lift us up through their dedication in building that authentic relationship, adhering to all the principles that I outlined in the beginning. So that's kind of my story of a really great partnership. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Reagan. That was wonderful. And I think speaks to so many things that people should consider when walking into making new relations with people. And I think too, it's important to think of it as how we ourselves would want to have a relation with just a new person in general. I think we've said many times before, it's kind of like dating. You want to build it in a good way and go into it with good intentions. And I think that element of understanding is so important without just going in with that agenda right off the bat. But thank you, Reagan. That was wonderful. Next up, I have Carly. So Carly, is there a success story that you can think of a strong relationship you've built?
So when I think about building strong relationships, I'm going to come from a perspective of ceremony. So when I think about our tea dance, so the tea dance, we utilize it to bring together organizations. We utilize it so that we can come to decisions. We can talk about certain aspects that, let's say that organization needs input from elders. So we have those elders come together. The elders have different rounds of tea where they drink and we sing songs. We ask a question to the elders and we get their input. So it's based on obtaining that input it's based on obtaining that input, but in a safe, ethical space for the elders to do so. Because when it comes to relationship making and organizations and Western society and Indigenous communities, we all know that that's a horrible past that we have. There comes issues of trust. There comes issues of misunderstanding. They're two totally different worlds. So within a tea dance, we bring in the Western community and we're all working together for a goal and objective. So that goal may be somebody wants to answer to how can we better the youth? How can we establish an elder-youth relationship? How can we do this together? So in order to obtain that information, they need to walk in the world of oral tradition and participate in drinking the tea, participate in doing the dances in order to have those conversations with the elders. So we're creating those safe spaces for our elders to make those relationships with these organizations. So when I think of the tea dance specifically, a few years ago, almost 10 years ago now, myself, my sister, my grandfather revived the tea ceremony. And like I said, it was utilized to help make decisions and announcements and involves dancing, sharing tea and songs. And it's for facilitating ideas an organization might have when it comes to decision making or gathering knowledge. And since we started these tea dances, we were able to make relations with over a dozen organizations within the city of Calgary. And we continue to work with those organizations in a paralleling way, so paralleling the oral tradition and the Western understandings. Now we have those organizations looking to Indigenous ways of knowing and being in order to make a wholesome decision. But some challenges I personally encountered when going through this process of making relations is the inability to understand each other and an oral process of doing things. So a bit of background on me, the way I was raised traditionally by my grandparents. I was raised in the ceremony. I was raised in society. I was raised in a daily culture. a cultural immersion, as how we refer to it. So going from my cultural immersion of life and growing up, I came to the city and I went to post-secondary school. And I thought, oh, this is so great. I'm going to the university. They have such a huge Indigenous community that I get to be a part of. And when I joined that community, I was kind of taken back a bit, because going into it, I realized that I was somewhat of a unicorn. Most of these Indigenous people didn't have the opportunity to be raised by their grandparents, or didn't have the opportunity to participate in ceremony and culture. They didn't have that opportunity. And at one, I felt it made me feel scared, only because our culture is so rich and is so diverse. And to see people not have that, it made me want to help. So I went into helping people like reconnect with who they are and advocating for that as well. And also when I went into school, I was taking economics and I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is so scary. The environment of kind of like a top-down approach. So you have to be the best at everything. You have to get ahead. You have to study really hard. And this process is going about it for yourself. So I'm going through this process of obtaining my education in order to graduate with a bachelor's degree. And I'm going to do everything I can to get to that goal that I've set out for myself. So when you're obtaining this education, it's kind of for yourself. When you think about it, as an Indigenous person, for me, obtaining my education was so I can obtain this education and I can help my community. For example, what I'm doing right now, I'm creating bylaws, but based on oral traditions, using that oral practice and basing it within a Western system. So what's going to happen, whether people like it or not, sooner or later, but I'm helping with that process. But when I was in school, I was getting lost in this world that everyone else was living in, and I started to question myself and who I was as a person. So when you think about it, being immersed into an Indigenous experience, such as the tea dance, you have to really get to know each other. You have to really get to know who the elders are, have those conversations, share those stories, because it's completely different to us. Well, speaking for myself, in order to make relations, for me, I personally need to get to know somebody on a personal basis, just based on the history of mistrust, based on the history that we have with government and organization. I think that's super important. And the two worlds kind of get lost in like a cultural confusion. And just like any other relationship, we really need to understand each other and respect each other's ways of doing things and thinking. And I think in order to overcome these challenges with cultural confusion, we need to share more about who we are and get to know each other on a more personal level. It's great we base these relationships through business and partnerships, but I really think it comes down to understanding and respecting each other as people. And so, like, let's think about making relations with an elders group. There's a different process you're going to take. You're not going to come into the room with a language that isn't inclusive. And even in order to do so, it's super important to understand the stage that you're entering and how can we relate? How can we make connections with these people? Just like Brianna said, it's like making a relationship. It's going dating somebody. You need to think about them as like a whole, their wellness, who they are as people. How can I respect them? So we can create these partnerships, but what is different when it comes to relationships is getting to know each other on a more intimate level and creating those ethical, safe spaces for Indigenous communities, for the elders.
Thank you, Carly. That's wonderful. Such good, insightful things that really come down to basic human interaction at the end of the day. So we all need to somehow work to get back to that, because like the great disconnect, we are also kind of losing that ability. So thank you, Carly. We have about 8 minutes left, so plenty of time for Casey. So Casey, can you think of a success story of a strong relationship you have built that supported your community? And were there any challenges?
Well, I'll be biased here. I think the relationship that I built with Communities Choose Well is probably one of the strongest that I have right now. And it's been 12 years. I mean, for 10 years. In 2012, I first got connected with you guys, and I was looking back on the plaque this morning that sits in my office, and I said, you know what? It's been 10 years that I've been involved in this partnership. And I can answer this question two ways. I feel like, like you said, like you guys mentioned, it is like a relationship. You got to build that understanding, you got to build that trust on both sides. And it's important, to have a relationship that 10 years, but secondly, a relationship that I've built is a relationship of all the programs and services that you provide. And, when I first started I'll just use the community freezer, for example. I had a relationship with our leadership because, my father's been in leadership for 20 years and still standing. And of course, there was a support, but every leader has, their own agenda. But also too, I really felt that, in order to get the project up and running, I had to build those relationships with my grassroots people, because it's our grassroots people in every community that, get forgotten. And at the same time, they're the ones who drive every single program, within each First Nations. And I really, and to this day, I have, that's one of my strong relationships, is that, I'm able to connect with them, even though everybody comes from, different social levels of society. Because, there wouldn't be Community Freezer if I didn't have those relationships. But also too, to finish off here, my relationship with Communities Choose Well has, created a lot of open networking for me. And I really am very, very thankful for that, because, not only have I had a relationship with you guys, but with using your networking outlets, I was able to, get the program out to other organizations within the province, most notably to like for example, like CBC. CBC have contacted me, and after I'm done this, I got to go get the back set up, because CBC are going to be here doing an expose on the community freezer, and I'm very excited about that. And it is a bit chilly out today, but nonetheless, we hunted hard for the last week and a half to get this all prepared, and I'll probably share that story once that's all finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Casey. Yeah, we know we love having Casey as part of Choose Well, and again, not to be biased, but of course, the work that he does that you do is great, and it is a good example of how a strong relationship can be built. And back to what you said about the grassroots people, like it takes that one or two people who really have that passion, and when you bring them together, a lot can come from that. So thank you, Casey, for sharing. I think we'll kind of wrap up soon. I will invite Janet to just maybe close off on some of that briefly before we wrap up. I think we have a little bit of time there.
I like the word briefly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Every time I go to visit Casey, I like to work out in his gym, because he's a fantastic gym. But those Choose Well plaques are like everywhere. And it's interesting how it just makes me proud. Just having Casey be proud about that relationship. And again, an amazing gym. I love that gym, Casey. So thank you for that. That was amazing. And I did want to acknowledge too that, like Adrian was saying, so Adrian and his wife, Sharon Goulet, they were the people who instigated our reconciliation journey. And we always know to talk about our source stories. And so I always do recognize Adrian and Sharon in the work that they did to help us do all this stuff. Because I look at it, we started with that document that then Adrian then came on board as a partner. We also work with Sharon, and here we are now in this panel together 6 years later. So I think I just want to stress the points that we are friends, and what I've heard from elders and from others is that I've built a family and I've built friendships, and once in a while we do work together. And I think that is really the important part. And when we're talking about elders too, like Carly was saying, when you're a good helper, as Adrian was saying, as you're doing all these pieces, Casey was saying too, working from ground up, one thing I find if we look at it like relationships, it's just not doing things that I like to do. It's not just doing the work that I find fun or easy. I don't just call and talk to elders between 9 to 5 because that's my office hours. If I really, just like I wouldn't like talk to my mom between 2 to 1 because that's mom time. So if we're actually really looking at genuine relationships and how we're doing this work, there is that realignment or that paradigm shift where you think, how can I be a good helper? Not how can I benefit? Not how can I do things that I actually want to do or affects my organization in a good way? How can I do the things that the elders, my partners, my friends, or my family are requesting of me so that together we can benefit? And I think when that approach is taken, endless amazing things have happened to myself. I'll tell you to ARPA as an organization. I see our partners thriving. You know, thank God for Reagan for shouting out to Alberta Blue Cross, because even like Alberta Blue Cross, we're moving on in a new way to do a series of grants that you'll hear about that will touch base in a lot of Indigenous communities across Alberta. So as you work with people you genuinely like, that you genuinely want to spend time with, things just keep going and they keep growing. So I think that really is the key, is that you have to do things in a way that helps others, and that's the mandate first. And like everybody was saying, in ways that they want to be helped, in ways that they understand, and in ways that resonate with the community and people that you're dealing with, and not things that you feel, you think you might kind of get from something that you read somewhere, but actual genuine interactions. So I think that would be my summary, Brianna, in a nutshell. How was that, team?
That was fantastic.
Thumbs up. Thumbs up. Adrian seemed to have lost his camera somehow along the way, but he's thumbs upping as well. So I would say that would be my summary, but I also do open it up if anyone else wants to, you know, move past that point or add anything to that.
I'll leave it. See if anyone. All right. No, I think you did a great job at summing that up in a nutshell. And I think that speaks to all the different perspectives that we were able to hear today. So with that, I think I'm ready to wrap it up. And I want to thank you sincerely for just being here and sharing those stories. I think a lot of people are going to move forward in a different way when they look to make those traditional relations. So very valuable, very insightful. So thank you. And we'll make sure to give you your gifts and tobacco in the coming days at the end of symposium.